Hello, I'm your host, Anna Clements, and this is Audiobooks with Anna. In this episode, we chat with Dan Friedman to find out about his new book and talk about his career to date. My favourite quote from this episode is that it's a crock-pot career, not a microwave meal. Let's talk to Dan. Dan, welcome to the sofa. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, Anna. Good to see you.
Are you well?
I can't complain.
Thanks again for joining us today and having a chat with us. So yes, welcome everybody to the room. We're chatting today with Dan Friedman. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's here and very kindly giving up an hour to chat with us during his lunchtime. Dan's here today because I think he's wonderful, and he also happens to have a new book coming out, but I'm hoping to get lots more information out of him about his career and his life. So Dan, welcome to the Clubhouse sofa. We've had some issues over the past couple of weeks as Clubhouse, the app has been changing and shifting, and it's been quite the adventure. So I'm thrilled that there are so many people here already with us today, and hopefully we'll have more joining us. But tell us a bit about you and how you even began in all this.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Well,
there's a great big question, isn't it?
Yes. Well, thank you, first of all, so much for having me. It truly is a pleasure to be able to chat with you all and to be invited. So I started as an audio engineer back in 1995. I was working for bands and I was doing everything from small shows where, the only guys in the room were the musicians on stage, to in front of 12,000 people in the streets of Tampa. So it started there, but I worked in radio a few years as well. And then I moved to after I left radio, I went to a studio that specialized in telephony. And I managed that studio for a year, and that was really my introduction to the voiceover world.
Sorry, so take me back to telephony. Does that mean like IVR and sort of answering systems, and
Exactly.
You as their engineer?
I was a studio manager and an engineer, and we did telephony in something like 30 languages, I think. So you haven't edited until you've edited Mandarin Chinese and don't speak the language.
I love the idea of hearing "please press 2" in 30 different languages. That's fantastic.
It was boring as hell.
Oh dear.
I'm not gonna lie, it was boring as hell, but it was great because it really kicked off my career as far as in this world. Because before this, I probably would have gone into music, and I might have taken a completely different path, which would have probably been fine as well, but that kind of life wasn't really conducive to having a family and all of that. So it's better off that it went the way it did, because I have two amazing kids, and who are about to leave the house soon. So it all worked out the way it was supposed to. But that's how I got started in voiceover, working in a studio in telephony, and then I worked for a production studio, a high volume production studio, for 13 years as a production engineer, talent liaison, all of those roles. And then I went off on my own. And that was back in 2014, when I went off on my own.
Talk to us. I'm going to interrupt you a second just to back up slightly, because I'm aware that your first book actually came out in 2010. So
Yes.
By then you've already been in the industry 10 or 15 years. You obviously felt the urge. Talk to us a second about what it felt like to be an author and that need to put all that stuff in writing. And talk to us about that book, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So it was very interesting. I was a journalism major in high school, or I was a journalism major in college. I was editor of my high school newspaper, so writing was not foreign to me. When it came time to write the book, I was consulting with talent every day, working with talent every day, and helping them with their recording studios, and helping them get sounds, and helping them with do demos, and all of this stuff. I mean, 40 hours a week, right? Sometimes more. So I was confronted with somebody who said, I fixed their problem, and they just were really appreciative. And they're like, you ought to write a book. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to write a book. That's crazy. And then it happened again. The following week, somebody said the exact same thing. And I kind of said, the universe might be telling me something. And then the following week after that, it was kind of these 3 consecutive weeks, and somebody just made me angry in the studio. There was some misbehavior, a talent acting in a way that it was so egocentric and just didn't want to play the game of, cooperating with the client or with the session. And I just couldn't believe that this person was throwing around such attitude. And it made me so mad that the etiquette issue became a real thing. And I said, you know what, I should write the book, because if people don't really understand this and they don't really know what's going on, or they maybe have gotten complacent, or they just, they're in their home studio already. People were in their home studios. I've been working with talent remotely for a decade already. So they were already starting to get into these bubbles. And I felt like it would be really helpful and important to go ahead and write the book now, because it really could be beneficial. And when it first came out, I had no idea that anybody was going to care about what some dude in Asheville, North Carolina had to say. It was a lot of nervousness surrounding that, right? Because I'm not in LA, I'm not New York, nor would I want to be I certainly wouldn't want to be in LA. It's not the place for me, but I didn't know that anybody would care. And as it turns out, just last year it was ranked in Backstage magazine as one of the top 9 must-reads for voiceover talent a decade later.
And congratulations on that. I must comment, it's called Sound Advice. I've just put a link in the chat. Do feel free to go and buy it, but we're actually here to talk about your new book. But I did put a link there, and I apologize for putting the Amazon link. I'm aware that many independent bookstores are also available and also sell Dan's book, but highly recommend. Talk to us a second, Dan, about some of the comments you've had on the book, because I know when I met you 6 or 7 years ago, I picked up the book. And what surprised me was that it actually contained everything I wish I'd known when I started. So all the information that was practical and technical that I ended up learning by myself because I didn't know who to ask and I hadn't met you yet, which I wish I had. Yeah. It kind of broke it down into bite-sized pieces that allowed me to go, oh, that's why that makes sense, and that's why that's a thing. Is that what you felt you wanted to do with the book? Was it for people like me at the beginning of their voiceover career?
Oh gosh, absolutely. Here's the thing. People let this become intimidating because it seems like it should be. And certainly if you're someone my age, when you started this, it probably was intimidating, because you imagine the recording studio as being, where the Beatles recorded. And it looks intimidating, and you think about that. But, we actually have more power in our cell phones than the Beatles had when they recorded Sgt. Pepper. So I get that it can be intimidating. And I did really want to break it down into something that would be easy for people to understand. And that really, your comment really is the comment that I get most, that it's the book that most people wish they had before they went out and bought all their equipment, before they really... The thing is that most people don't get excited about the technical stuff because they're intimidated by the technical stuff. Therefore, they don't necessarily want to go out and read a book about that because they feel it's going to be over their heads or that it's going to be confusing. But I always try and simplify it. One of the things that I enjoy learning, and I have focused in the last couple of years, believe it or not, on learning how to play guitar. I've never learned to play, even though I've been in the business and around them forever. I never learned to play, and I made it my mission to learn to play. And there are so many parallels to learning to play guitar to the way that I teach and the way that I break things down, because you can't learn 42 notes in one solo in a sitting. You really have to break it down to like 4 at a time, and then get your hands to do that. And then if you can do that, then you can move on to maybe adding 2 more at any given moment. So that's really been the way that I have tried to teach since I began teaching, and I wasn't even serious. I didn't even get into that seriously, or I should say, I even resisted teaching for a while because I just felt like that wasn't my space. But I really do feel that it is now, and COVID having really, I think for many of us, assessed our lives and what it is that we're doing and what makes us happy. Teaching voiceover makes me incredibly happy, and transforming people's deliveries and watching them grow in their careers makes me incredibly happy. So that's why I have focused on that, and will continue to focus on that, and playing guitar and hopefully writing more books.
Absolutely. And it's very organic the way you teach, but we'll come on to that in a second. So we've got as far as 2014. You've left somebody else's employ to start up on your own. What was that like?
Well, I was ready. I really was ready to make that move. And it was good. I mean, naturally, it was frightening. It was certainly a frightening thing to do. But, from a financial standpoint, it's really been one of the best decisions I ever made, because thankfully, I did have a reputation in the business. It's not something that everybody could do, but I had built a reputation in the business to a certain degree. Now, to be honest with you, that was much more beneficial when it comes to working with other voice actors. It really had nothing to do with getting clients. So, as in my own voice acting business. So, I still had to go out and do that. I still had to go and pursue the work that I wanted to get. I still had to fight for jobs and audition and get on this roster and get on that roster. I still had to do all those things. But I'll tell you, lately, because coaching and teaching has always been something that people came to me for, and I never really leaned into it. I never made it my business or anything like that, because people were coming to me automatically for that because they knew my reputation. I never had to lean into it. I never thought about leaning into it until COVID. And then I decided, you know what? I mean, I've put in all this, I've done this time. I've been coaching all along. People are coming to me for it without me even talking about it. So I think that's really what I would like to do. And so that's how it really began.
There is something wonderful about that word of mouth and that kind of organic feel to people coming to you because they know other people who have either, experienced your class or worked with you. There's something really lovely about it just creating itself organically over time. And I think that's, again, having just seen you now at VO Atlanta teaching, it's been wonderful to watch what has become a very natural progression over a lot of years. You're an overnight success over the last 20 years, aren't you? That's
what I always say. It took a lot of years of hard work and experience to become an overnight success. And I never, it's a journey. I don't feel for a second that I am a success yet. Really, I mean, I want to continue to. Strangely enough, I almost feel like that if I could play guitar in front of 10,000 people and sing in front of 10,000 people, that would be a much greater success, because that always seemed like something that was just so impossible to do. And in the last couple of years now, as I learn, I'm like, you know what? That's really not so impossible. I've made so many of these other things come true. Why couldn't I make that come true? You just never know.
It's also funny how as your goals get bigger, the goalposts start moving, don't they? So well done you on always reaching. And I'm glad we're able to hopefully bring you to a larger audience here and introduce you to some more people who will find your information, hugely valuable. Talk to us a second about being a coach and a director. Do you coach online over Zoom? Is that how you kind of set up your sessions?
I have worked with people in person, as you know. I have worked with people in large groups. I've worked with people. Generally, I am working one-on-one with Zoom clients, and I work with people all over. I actually, today, oddly enough, I worked with, I met with a gentleman who was from the UK, but just moved to Asheville.
Wow, it's a small world.
I know. I know. So very interesting, very interesting. But yes, I work with people all over.
Fantastic. And talk to me then about directing, because the session I attended that you gave in VO Atlanta was very much, and what I loved about it was the way you were able to break down a script to sort of analyze the words and actually pay attention to what's being asked of the voice artist. And it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to people, and is something that's very relevant to audiobooks. So the fact that we are required to find the meaning within the paragraph, despite the author using 1,000 words instead of 60, there is always a point to the large body of text. And it's a very similar process to the process that you go through with your students. Is there a part of directing that you find easier, or that you find that voice artists find easier, or is it all just a one-on-one, basis that everybody comes along with individual problems, as it were?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's start at the very core of this. And the core of this is that the words don't matter. The words don't matter. And what I mean by that is that the actual words will not matter to the listener if there isn't an emotional attachment to them. The way our brain works is when we process sound, it hits our amygdala before it hits our prefrontal cortex. And that's important to know because the amygdala is responsible for emotion. And therefore, if you're hearing a monotone voice that's just talking like this and it just kind of stays like this and then it never really changes, right? But by the time I get past 7 or 8 seconds of that, you've already felt like you've heard everything I need to say. So there's no emotion, there's no intention in any of that. So we really do have to understand that these words have intention and they have meaning. They have impact. They need to be impactful in order to really connect with somebody. So to get to that emotional state for what those words mean is pretty critical. And what most voice actors, unfortunately, what I hear so often is, and I'm sure that some of you can relate to this, and this is my mission to help people not do this anymore. And that is that if you're asked to submit 2 takes on an audition, I'll bet you that about 95% of you record those 2 takes and you think at the time they're very different. And then if you went to listen back a week later, you would hear that those two takes are really nearly identical. So you're finding yourselves in a rut. And the reason you're finding yourself in a rut is because you're focused far more on how the words are sounding than how they feel to you. I'm talking about voiceover today. I'm talking with Anna, who's a good friend, and I love it, and I'm enjoying this conversation, right? And you can hear that hopefully in my voice. And this emotional state is one that I want to remember when I have something that I have to communicate that is emotional. In this same kind of, and in this same emotion, enthusiasm and happiness, right? How do I sound? How do I feel? How does that feel in my body? How can I communicate that? Well, when I go to communicate words that require that, then I'm going to remember this state that I'm in. I'm going to remember this physical feeling. I'm going to remember the sound of my voice. And I'm going to basically apply those same principles to the actual words that are now there on the page. And it's certainly a great place to start if you're in the right emotional state, because it will give you the right intention to connect those words.
I'm so pleased that's what you said, because that was exactly what I was after. It was the session I watched where it's difficult, isn't it, describing all of these things theoretically, when actually you start to play with sentences and phrases and you actually can appreciate that shift in sound when you shift the feeling behind the words, the feeling that's going on inside you while you're saying the words. And it's quite hard it's intangible, isn't it, unless you're actually doing it, which is what I loved watching while you were at VO Atlanta. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So move us on then from starting your own business. I mean, you are hugely successful in Asheville. Talk to us about this need then to write a second book.
Yeah, so, well, COVID. COVID was a big one My first mentor had passed away many years ago, and I write about him in the book. He was the one who, back in 2000, when I started in the voiceover world, he was the first one who really taught me about the language of voiceover, and I became a much better director than a voice talent at first, for sure. I was by far so much a better director. And then years later, I was in acting school for a little while, and my mentor there had just passed away while I was writing the book. And I was taking guitar lessons, and I had taken singing. Had been going to singing lessons for a little while as well. And then COVID hit, and like all of this just kind of just happened, right? So I just felt like I really needed to get some of this stuff that I had my notes on, and some notes I had for years. I just wanted to start putting it down and combining all of these methods that I had been learning and experimenting with and appreciating, and combining it with the knowledge that I had gained. And I had already written some blogs, so some of the blogs that I've repurposed them, and they're in the book, just because I know people aren't reading blogs as much, and this was a nice way to expose people to what I had been doing already for a long time, and that was blogging and that sort of thing. So that's how it really came about.
Yes, yeah. Tell us then. I'm going to have to pretend that I haven't read the book, because what I love about it is even right at the beginning, your mention of your boys and how very proud you are of them. The book feels really, really personal. And I love so throughout the book, as you mentioned, you've scattered blog posts from as early as 2010, almost like this book brought together ideas you've had for a very long time that finally found a place where you could say, I know I've been saying this forever, but this is why. Was there a sense of the book sort of culminating in that for you? Is that something I read far too much into it, perhaps?
No, I think that's amazing. I really don't know that I've necessarily thought about it in that context so much, but yeah, I think you're right. I think that it really is a lot of things that have been coming together. I knew it was very important to me to go ahead and get some of this stuff down, and I also knew that I didn't need to reinvent the wheel on some of this too. I had material that was available that also I think needed to be presented again and in a different way. Whether it was some sort of existential thing that was coming together, or convergence in the universe, I don't know, but I guess we'll find out if people really enjoy it and like it, and it moves the needle for people and helps them improve, or they gain something from it. That would be awesome. And I am just so proud of my kids. You just don't even understand. I just have like the two most amazing sons in the world. So it was really nice to be able to honor a little bit of their lives in this as well.
I must just query with you. I was fascinated. I have two daughters in their 20s now, and I was a little concerned initially about any work I would take on, how it might reflect on them, how they might see me if I worked for particular companies, or if I read particular, erotica or other genres or whatever. Turned out they had no interest whatsoever in my career. They've never listened to a book I've narrated. They could not care. They're very proud of me. They tell me they're thrilled, but they really couldn't care less. Are your boys interested in your work? Is it something obviously they've grown up with it. This has been a long-term process in your house. Are they fascinated by what you do?
Fascinated? I don't know that I'd say they're fascinated by it. It's very funny. Yeah, when I worked for a production studio, they would actually be in the car seat in the back of the studio. My oldest one even was in the car seat in the bucket, and he'd be sitting in the back of the studio while I'm directing sessions. So yeah, they've been around it. They actually both have done voiceover work when they were kids. They both did quite a bit of it. My oldest son still has his savings from that, and he is getting ready he wants to move to New York in the fall, and he is graduating Saturday from college. and he wants to move to New York in the fall, and he still has his voiceover savings. Has not been interested in it as a career or anything like that as an adult or even as a teenager. He kind of got the teenage ennui and moved on from there. My youngest son actually is somewhat following in my footsteps. He's into music big time. He actually, when he was in 8th grade, he was the best baritone sax player in the state of North Carolina for his age group. And he has worked in the studio with me a little bit. I've actually had him do a music search for some projects I was working on before, kind of introduced him to that. And he is graduating from high school in just like 3 or 4 weeks. And he is going to be going into the commercial music program at Western Carolina University. So he is closest to following me as far as careers go. I'm sure that he'll probably take over the name of the business and stuff someday when I'm no longer around. But that hopefully will be a long while. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Yes, not getting rid of you just yet. Absolutely. I have a couple of random questions that I like to throw in, and here comes one. Do you have a favorite emoji?
Thumbs up.
Oh, excellent. I've not had anybody reply that yet, so well done you.
I guess it's because I don't really, I only use a happy face or a thumbs up. I'm kind of, I guess.
Old school.
Oh, I should say though, I do use the one that is like the animated my face, so I have used that one. It's a version of that.
Excellent. Let's come back to the book a second, Dan. So how is this book different? Is this book about sound engineering as well? Or I know it's not.
Right. I did throw a few things about sound engineering in there because I thought it was too important to completely exclude. Yeah. But this one is very much more about my process for teaching voiceover, asking questions, how to analyze a script, how to do your homework, all of that stuff. And other points of view too, what it's like to be on the director's side a little bit and what they should be thinking. Because it's a natural progression sometimes for voice actors, hopefully, to direct other voice actors at some point. I think it's a great way to experience things from the other side.
It is a really interesting, I know as an audiobook narrator, my fascination is authors and seeing the world of audiobook production from their point of view has changed completely the way I approach the process. And I think you're right. I think it's a fascinating way to take a step back, to take 2 steps forward, which again, I feel like both the first book and this book help people to do. It's an overview from an angle that isn't necessarily the one you might come at it from. And as you said, people are excited about it, but the knowledge that they might feel they don't require, having a background in it or a basic knowledge of it is really useful when it comes to then appreciating how the whole industry works.
I mean, look, what business would you ever want to be in where you decided you were only going to know a small portion of it? I mean, it would be silly, right? It's best if you're going to be in something, get to know every side, get to know as many sides as you can. In our world, we have so much more responsibility than we did 20 years ago as voice actors or as audio engineers or as a musician or whatever you're pursuing. You have more responsibility. You're much more responsible for your own career, for your marketing, for your PR, for your until you get to a certain level. And even then, you're still responsible for a lot of it, and you have to handle it or hire people to do it for you. So you might as well know as much as you can about it.
Absolutely. Talk to us a second about, so we met at MAVO, the Mid-Atlantic Voiceover Conference, many years ago. And I saw you just recently at VO Atlanta, where I know, among other things, you were in charge of the team projects. As audiobook narrators, I'm aware that probably most of the audience doesn't know what that is. Can you give us an overview of what it is and what that experience is like, being in charge of all those people?
It's really, I'm not really in charge of the people so much. I'm really more in charge of the administration.
Yeah, I'm also aware it wouldn't run without you, Dan. So,
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you. I'm sure that that's not entirely true, but nonetheless, thank you. I really am in charge of the administration part of it because the people are on their own. They basically, once it's off and running, it is up to them to create their production.
Explain a second, sorry, what it is that occurs.
Sure, absolutely. So we've been doing this now for, I think this is in its 7th year. The first few years, it was the first couple years, it was actually mentored by a group of us. Anyhow, basically we have people get together, they sign up to be a part of it, then they're randomly placed onto a team. They don't know each other, I don't know who they are. They are all placed randomly onto a team. They are basically given a list of their other team members while they're at VO Atlanta, and they're expected to go meet one another, and then they are introduced they're introduced to their client, which is usually I hand them a flash drive and it has written information about the client. And from there, they are expected to produce in this past year, it was a 30-second radio spot. In previous years, it's been 60 seconds. And they have basically about 24 to 28 hours to complete that, having not known one another. They have to write the script. They have to put music with it, sound effects if necessary. Everybody or most people, depending on what the format is, have to have a speaking role. And they have to do all of this in the context of the conference, which, of course, you're going to classes and you're going to workshops and panels and all of that. So it's really exciting. People who do it love it. And they often come back and tell me, even years later, how they are still in contact with those people that they were in that group with. And they're still really good friends, they're accountability buddies, that sort of thing. And it's just great. I mean, it ticks all the boxes for me because it really brings people together. We usually pick a charity, not always, but we usually pick a charity for it to benefit. And it's exciting. And not that I'm a big competitive guy, but I think that people enjoy that part of it.
It seems like a really bonding experience. I think everybody knows that conferences are in and of themselves absolutely exhausting. But I am fascinated by the drive behind it. And as you say, I know lots of people who have participated, and the bond that's created among those people because of the pressure of having to meet up in time and create this thing in such a pressurized environment. What kind of things do they come up with that surprise you? Are you surprised by I was surprised by the quality of the content, but are you ever surprised by any of the results you get?
Wow, nobody's really asked me that question ever. I'm often surprised by the talent, how good they do turn out. I'm surprised by some how bad they turn out. I sometimes expect, wow, I would have thought that would have been different, or that they would have noticed this. Usually what surprises me more than anything is the small mistakes, because, obviously there's a lot going on. So when something comes out, kind of crazy and you're like, oh, wow, that's, a little head scratching. But it's the small mistakes that people miss, like they name a file wrong, or, those are the things we talk about all the time about getting right. And if you name the file wrong, or if you put it in the wrong format, that's the simple stuff, right? It's supposed to be the simple stuff anyway. And when people miss that stuff, it's kind of disappointing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You would hope it was the industry standard, wouldn't you? You would hope that, but we talk about it too. The production houses ask us for samples for audiobooks with very specific details about how they want the files named. And the one thing you do have control of and you can get right
Yeah, it's like showing up on time.
Yeah.
It just for me that is, and I even wrote about this in the book, I believe, and that's it's just so important. It's the easiest thing in the world, I think, to just be on time, and that's just one of the things that are important to me. It's fundamental. So it does surprise me. Those are the things that I would. As far as, I generally love when things are blow me away with the good quality and all the things. The things that surprise me are those little details because it's like, you should know better. That's all.
Yeah. I'm aware there's a question in the chat. Dan, I'm being asked why there isn't an audiobook of your books.
Yeah, as soon as I find a suitable narrator and somebody to do the editing, I'll make an audiobook.
What are your thoughts as an author? So not as a sound engineer, but as an author, what are you imagining the voice of your narrator sounds like? Is he from Asheville? Does he sound like you?
Oh gosh, well, I don't know that I sound like I'm from Asheville. I'm around here. You get a lot more of this, if you know what I mean.
So tell us what you're looking for. What are your thoughts?
To be honest, my wife has been hounding me exactly about this, so it's probably something I am going to do myself. I will do it, and I might actually have somebody direct me on it because I don't know that I really want to do it all myself. So we'll see. I'm tossing the idea around naturally. The book, I only just got it in print, so I'm kind of a baby steps kind of guy. I expect that things are going to take time, and sometimes that's due to my own procrastination, but baby steps.
That's fair enough. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I am aware that
it's fine.
The book isn't actually out yet, is it? It's on pre-order. 29th of May, I believe.
On Amazon, it is on pre-order, but if you join BookBaby, you can get it delivered to yourself early.
Excellent. Well, you heard it here first.
I can provide you with that link if you would
yes,
like.
Yes, please. That would be great. Well, I will cover for you for a second if you want to go looking for the link, and you can put that in the chat, and then I'll paste it to the top of the page. Just a quick refresh before we end the room today. We're here with Dan Friedman, author of Zen and the Art of Voiceover. Dan has so far covered the fact that he began as a sound engineer, worked his way through too many years in telephony, as far as I could tell. Back in September 2010, his books. Sorry,
I was going to say it was 1 year, and yes, that was too many.
Oh. I was sorry. Now I'm changing the pinned link because you were far quicker than I expected you to be. I was going to give us a summary of the room thus far. But yeah, no, thank you to everybody who's joining us here today. I've put the link at the top of the page. So there is a BookBaby link there for Zen and the Art of Voiceover if you would like it delivered before the Amazon due date of the 29th of May. And yes, if anybody has any questions, please do put them in I'm trying to read the chat. Julius has a family close to Asheville. Thank you, Julius. If you want to come up and tell us where they live, please feel free. I'm sure Dan probably knows them. This is like when people say, oh my God, you're from London. You probably know my uncle.
Well, we had, I'll be honest, we had a pretty robust voiceover community here for a while. And we still do have a lot of talent here, but we just don't get together like we used to because some of the people that were the main get-togetherers, the people who were very good at gathering us all together, they moved away. So we don't get together as much as we used to. And of course, the pandemic happened. I always forget about that, or I try to forget about that. But so that really, we don't see each other much anymore.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I think that we are all trying to forget the pandemic, but I think it has a lasting effect, doesn't it? I think it's changed a lot of our lives and made us all reprioritize, as you mentioned earlier on. I think the reprioritizing has been a good thing. I think a lot of us have had to make new choices. Talk to us a bit more, speaking of which, about guitar and singing. Was that as a result of a conscious decision to realize a long-held dream, perhaps?
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say my other job should have been rock star. No, I'm kidding.
When I met you, I
That's
was under the impression that you were a musician. I didn't think twice. And so to hear you in the last couple of years mention that you've been learning guitar and taking singing lessons and wanting to sort of pursue that more has been a really interesting sort of turn for me, because
yeah.
I don't know why I had presumed that was already a thing for you. So it's been really interesting to hear you talk about it.
Well, I've just been working on the other side of the glass, so to speak, for so long. And part of before the pandemic even happened, I did decide I wanted to take singing lessons, because voiceover lessons and, doing all that, I needed something different. I needed something different because I was already teaching, and I just wanted something different. So singing lessons I knew would expand my horizons, my vocal horizons. So I started doing that, and I mean, the second lesson, my teacher was like, "So why aren't you doing this?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Singing." I said, I don't know. I didn't realize I could do that." And she's like, "Absolutely you can. So why don't you, join a band and do that?" So she hooked me up with some people, and I joined a band, and I sang on stage, and, it was kind of no different than, as far as a performance side of things, being in front of people. I was comfortable with all the elements of it, except for the singing in front of people part. So I didn't mind being in front of people, and I didn't mind being up on a stage, and that was all fine for me. It was just singing. So once I realized I could do that, then it wasn't a big deal. And I did, for my 50th birthday, I did a 22 song set to a fairly decent crowd, and it was fun. But I also was in a position where I said, I would really like to be doing something up on this stage while I'm not singing. So maybe it would be a good idea to learn how to play guitar finally. So that led to that.
It was that or spin plates, was it?
Yes, I like to push myself a little bit. So singing is wonderful, and I love it. Singing has, I have to say, I don't talk about this stuff too much, but like mentally, for your mental health, singing is just an amazing way to really reset your brain. It really did a lot, and it came at the right time because, of course, the pandemic was happening. So it was great to be practicing something every day and to work towards something. In my band, we recorded songs. Everybody recorded their parts from home, and I did all the mixing here. So it was a great way to spend time during the pandemic and to get good, because what else I didn't have to be anywhere else. So I spent a lot of that time working on that. And then the guitar playing started, and I play just about every day for at least 20 minutes. And sometimes I'll play for a few hours if I have the time and can do it. Because I really enjoy it, and I really would like to get good at it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I heard a TED talk the other day, and the guy talked about the fact that if you did 18 minutes of something a day, by the end of the year, you've done 100 hours. And it blew my mind to think that actually it is about consistency, isn't it? It's about the little things all the time, rather than attempting to kind of blast your way through anything. And as you mentioned, the growth of, your business and your career has been incremental and organic. And I think you can't suddenly know how to do something, but you can learn to do it, which is wonderful. Well done, you.
Well, thank you. Here's the thing, and I've been so keen to tell people this lately, and that is, especially when it comes to voiceover or when it comes to any artistic pursuit, especially, it's not something that you can just put down on paper and know how to do. It is something that must be experienced in order to do well. And to experience it for an hour at a workshop, or to experience it for a weekend, in a group setting with other people, and then suddenly think you're going to come out of that and be a voice actor or an artist of any kind, that's really an impossible goal, or it's not possible, right? You have to experience these things in order for them to really sink in, for you to make mistakes, for you to fail at things, for you to make comparisons. One of the biggest issues that voice actors have today is that they aren't in studios with other people. They don't know what other studios sound like. They don't know what other talent are doing. They don't get to hear all the auditions that I get to hear. They don't get to hear all the different talent and their different setups, right? So it's this comparison and this A and B, this versus that, and experiencing those differences. That's what really allows you to become someone, hopefully, if you can process that. That's where the learning happens. It's where the learning happens. And you just can't be good at something overnight. It really, like I said, or we said earlier, it takes lots of years to become an overnight success.
Absolutely. And it is so progressive. I'm always fascinated by the fact that you don't know what you don't know. So even when you think you're doing okay and you're learning a lot, you have no concept of how much more there is to learn. I'm always reminded of when I began and I was worrying about noise floor and how quiet was. And I did a course and they talked about the different levels of silence. And I physically could not hear the difference between minus 30 dB and minus 80 dB. And they would say, you hear this silence? And now I'm going to play you this silence. And I'd be sat there with my eyes shut and my headphones on. And I'd be like, I hear nothing. And now I hear nothing. And now I understand what I was listening for. And I don't know that you almost, as you say, can't force that into being. You have to experience it and it has to grow within you. And that takes time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a crock pot career, not a microwave meal.
Oh, love that. Love that. Crock pot. Let me ask you my final question then. Oh, two questions. If you hadn't been able to do anything to do with sound engineering, voiceover work, coaching, directing, writing about it, and all the stuff you have done, what do you imagine you might have done?
Wow, that's a really good question. If it couldn't have anything to do with this business at all, so no musical equipment involved whatsoever, yeah. I don't know. I wanted to write, when I was in high school, I wanted to be editor of Rolling Stone magazine.
Oh, love that. Love that.
I thought that would be a pretty cool gig.
I sometimes wonder if as teenagers, we should write stuff down and pick it up again at 35 or 40 and go, do you know what? Maybe it wasn't such a crazy idea and I should actually go down this path and see what happens. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing I did a lot of, too, was photography. I was actually, before I even got into sound and all of that, I was actually shooting pictures of bands. And that's kind of what led me to sound, is because I was doing promo packs and work for different bands around town. And I was at I was with my band at a club gig, and the sound engineer needed to go out of town. He's like, "Man, you're here all the time. You want to learn how to run sound?" I said, "Fuck yeah, I want to learn how to run sound."
So, I love that. You're here anyway.
Yeah, I'm here anyway.
Fantastic. Dan, has life worked out like you thought it would? If you take yourself back a second, sort of 20 years could you have imagined being where you are now?
Ooh, that's a heavy question.
Yeah, sorry. I was hoping you might have warmed up to it. You know, have we got there yet?
Well, no, it hasn't worked out anything like I expected it to. But I mean, what do you really know 20 years earlier, right? Some things have been amazing. Some things have been disappointing. Some things have been far beyond anything that I ever could have imagined. I'm a realist about these things, right? I mean, not everything has worked out the way I'd always wanted it to, but not everything was supposed to work out the way I always wanted it to, because it was supposed to work out differently. Yeah. And that's okay. I have really very little to complain about in the world. I have a great family. My job in this world, as it turns out to be, was to produce two kids who are better than me. And I've done that. So that was the real goal. The fact that anything else happened along the way is really just icing on the cake, I guess.
Absolutely love that. I would have liked to have finished there because I love that. I love that idea. But I must just ask, are you the kind of person who plans? Do you have a 5-year plan? Do you attempt to guide your future, or do you find yourself in places and thank your lucky stars?
Oh boy. No, I actually would love to hire somebody to create the 5-year plan for me. I would love them to design it. I would love them to put it together for me, tell me what to do, and I will do it. No, I am not a planner. My wife is a planner, but I do not want her planning my future.
No, those are two very separate things, aren't they?
my business future is, it's best that I just, hire. If I'm going to have somebody plan it for me, it better be somebody different.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to take advantage of these last few minutes just to close up the room here today. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with us. I hope that the book is a huge success for you. As I mentioned, the first book, Sound Advice, is still a staple with regards to if you're interested in the sound side of voice work and you don't know where to start, or you have too many questions, check out Dan's book, because it's an industry standard. I feel like it answers so many questions, things you didn't know you should know about from the other side of the desk, as you say so beautifully. And thank you for sharing Zen and the art of voiceover with us. Again, I hope it's a huge success when it comes out on Amazon at the end of the month. And at the top of the page here is the bookbaby.com link, so that everybody can buy it now if they'd like to. My takeaways? Buy his book. It's a great read. I have to admit to have taken advantage of it already and really enjoyed it. It's a very personal take on the industry and is full of really useful information with regards to voiceover. Been a great conversation, Dan. Thank you very much. Thank you to people in the audience who joined in and contributed with your questions and your chat. Take care, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and Dan's thoughts on voice coaching. Thank you very much for listening in and joining us on this podcast. Do remember to like and subscribe. Apparently that's a thing. I've been your host, Anna Clements. Further details are in the show notes, and if you'd like to work with me or any further information about voice, do get in touch. Thank you for listening.